I mean, I also don't think there's any huge evidence that negotiations produce nuclear non-proliferation. I just think this is a very...
Come on.
I think it's
the entire history of the post-war era.
Mehdi Hasan appeared as a guest on the right-wing podcast Trigonometry, where he debated with the hosts on several topics. And in the clip being discussed here, Mehdi Hasan is talking with the Trigonometry hosts about the situation involving Iran, including the idea of war and the issue of nuclear weapons and whether Iran should have them. And now we are going to look at some parts from this debate between Mehdi Hasan and Trigonometry, while also sharing some thoughts along the way. So let's get into it together.
Mehdi, there'd be people who go, well, look, you've mentioned Hezbollah. Iran funds Hezbollah. They fund Hamas. They effectively destabilize the region. I don't say that I agree with this, actually, but they would say, look, if we deal with Iran, long term, we're going to get a better, more prosperous, more stable Middle East. What would you say to that?
I would say Benjamin Netanyahu said exactly those words in front of Congress in 2002. He said, if you invade Iraq, there'll be positive reverberations throughout the region. What happened? We got ISIS. We got Al-Qaeda in Iraq. We got 20 years. We got 7/7 bombings in London. Tony Blair was warned, if you invade Iraq, there will be bombings at home. The Joint Intelligence Committee told him in 2003. He ignored those warnings. We got more terrorism, more blowback, more violence, more regional instability, more refugees. That's what I fear is happening now with Iran. In terms of destabilizing the region, look, this is where we get to, like, where do you start the clock? I would say, yes, of course, Hezbollah and Hamas destabilize the region, but they would argue, and many people would argue, that the destabilizing began with Iran. They are a reaction to Israel's actions. So, you know, it depends where you want. Like I said, 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon. There was no Hezbollah in 1982. So, look, Iran does play a role that is malign. I've never defended blindly Iran. Iran does bad things. No one's debating that. Many countries in the Middle East do bad things. We are not invading Saudi Arabia. I think we would all agree around this table does bad things, has done bad things. We are not invading and trying to topple Saudi Arabia or bombing their oil fields and gas facilities, and I'm glad we're not. So I don't think this war is a solution to the problem. Oh, by the way, what is the problem? Donald Trump will not tell us what the goals of this war are. It changes every day. Marco Rubio says it's degrading the Navy. First they said it was a nuclear program that they obliterated last year in the 12-day war, apparently.
There's a lot of evidence that the nuclear material may well have been removed prior to this strike.
But I'm saying this war was not about the nuclear program because it's done nothing to...
Well, that's actually the thing that they have said that makes sense to me. Like, I think I'm actually kind of with you in terms of I don't understand what the goals of this thing are. If we take it that the nuclear stuff and degrading the military, that's fine. But then why are you killing their leaders? That's the bit I don't understand.
Well, interestingly, they're not killing their leaders, right? They killed Khamenei, but the Israelis are doing much of the killing. They've killed the intelligence minister. They killed Ali Larijani. Now, let's just deal with what Israel wants, because what Israel wants is pretty clear to anyone watching. They want an unstable, weakened Iran that doesn't pose a threat to them. They don't care if it's a democracy. They don't care if it's a dictatorship. They don't care if it's civil war. They just want Iran off the table. Right? And therefore, they're killing people who might do a deal with Trump. They've done this before. Last year in the 12-day war, they tried to kill a guy called Ali Shamkhani, who survived. Then they killed him now. He was a negotiator who Trump had been praising and reposting on social media. They killed him because they don't want Trump to do a deal with this guy.
Why not?
Because they don't want to negotiate a solution to this conflict. They want to keep going, the Israelis, until they wipe out everything they want to.
Yeah, they want to degrade Iran.
They don't want Donald Trump to do one of his deals. That's the worst thing they could have done. They didn't want the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal that Obama signed, that resolved the nuclear program for at least 15 years. They were dead against that deal.
But so was Trump himself.
Yes, and Trump pulled out of that deal. And then what happened? Enrichment went up. Then Biden came back in, said, let's try and go back into that deal. The Israelis attacked Natanz in 2021. They enriched up to 60%. Then last year, they went to Oman to negotiate. They had a meeting scheduled for Sunday. The Israelis bombed on Friday. This year, they negotiated in Geneva. The Omani foreign minister came to DC and said, a deal's on the table. Apparently, Jonathan Powell from the UK said there was a deal to be done. Guess what happened? The US and Israel bombed the next day. There's a history of Israel in particular, but also the US, bombing every time we're close to a deal. Every time there's a negotiation in place.
And this is why we just come back to the nuclear point, because I agree with you. It's very clear that there's a difference between the interests of the United States and the war goals of the United States and the war goals and interests of Israel. And Israel's war goals and interests are actually very clear. I'm very unclear as to what the US wants.
Well, if it is the nuclear program, I think we're both unclear, but if it is the nuclear program, I don't think they know. But if it is the nuclear program, this is not the way to do it. Negotiations are the way to solve Israel. Most experts say you cannot bomb away a nuclear program. It's in people's heads. It's scientific expertise. You cannot kill every scientist and academic.
You can destroy the nuclear material.
And then they can then years later, they can rebuild facilities and enrich again.
Sure.
And then you're just mowing the lawn, as the Israelis say, go in and bomb every couple of years. But we had a JCPOA. We had a deal that was working. The IAEA said Iran was in compliance with it. Do you know how much enriched uranium they had under the JCPOA? 3.64%. You know how much they have now? 60%. You know, you want to go back to logic. Logic tells me that was a failure to get out of that deal.
I mean, I also don't think there's any huge evidence that negotiations produce nuclear non-proliferation. I just think this is a very...
Come on.
I think it's
the entire history of the post-war era.
Well, if you look at Ukraine, for example, Ukraine was forced to give away its nuclear weapons and made itself very vulnerable. And I've been on record as saying, I think that in and of itself and the fact that we haven't supported Ukraine properly will lead to more nuclear proliferation.
I agree with you on that.
And I think on this issue too, I don't see what the incentive would be for Iran not to pursue nuclear weapons.
Well, we're in agreement, but not just Iran. So I interviewed, again, if you guys remember the Iraq war, do you remember Mohammed al-Baradei? He was the head of the IAEA.
Yes.
Him and Hans Blix went to the UN and said, don't invade Iraq. We
were both against the war in Iraq.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying this to you, because I know you understand. He said, we can guarantee disarmament. He was the head of the nuclear watchdog, spent his life opposing nuclear proliferation. I interviewed him recently. I said, if you were in the Turkish government right now, which Israel is saying is next, would you try and get nukes? And he said, yes. I was astonished. This is a man who's devoted his life. Because, as you say, everyone now has an incentive to get nukes. Why would you not?
No, my point was even broader than that, Mehdi, which is that I think everyone always has the incentive to get nukes. And that's where I don't think negotiating with Iran...
So that's where we disagree.
Hold on, but let me finish the point, though. I don't think that's... In that situation, I don't think Iran has any interest in that. Iran is very clearly... The reason the Gulf Arab states and Israel all want Iran degraded and all supported this conflict, by the way, and are still encouraging it, the Gulf states, especially internally. The people at the top, the people on the street may not, is because Iran wants to dominate the region. It's a perfectly legitimate thing for Iran to want to do. But that being the case, the fact that they fund proxies to facilitate that process, of course they'd want nuclear weapons, and I don't think they'd negotiate them away.
Well, they already did negotiate them.
So when it comes to countries wanting nuclear weapons, what the trigonometry host is saying here actually connects to what we have seen recently, especially with Donald Trump making threats toward multiple countries and the actions the United States has taken in places like Venezuela, and because of that, it is not just countries in the Middle East anymore, but even nations in Central and South America that could start thinking they need nuclear weapons as a form of deterrence to protect themselves from possible intervention or regime change attempts, which is something that has happened repeatedly in the past. And this ties into what Mehdi Hasan was saying in the debate when he pointed out the position of someone who was originally against nuclear spread, but then admitted that if he were leading a country like Turkey, he would actually want nuclear weapons. And when you look at that logic, it leads to the idea that almost any country outside the United States might feel pressured to pursue nuclear weapons purely for self-defense because of how often the United States is involved in wars or threats around the world. And when it comes to Mehdi Hasan going on trigonometry, it honestly raises the question of why these shows even debate him in the first place, because apart from gaining views, there are very few debates where Mehdi Hasan has not clearly outperformed and dominated the person he is debating against. I mean, even if someone does not like Mehdi Hasan, he clearly comes prepared and backs up everything he says with facts, and like I mentioned earlier, he usually ends up dominating these debates, which is why I personally enjoy watching him go up against right-wingers since I come from a progressive point of view. And in this discussion he brings up Saudi Arabia, which is something I also talk about often in my videos, especially when people from MAGA circles or right-wing platforms like trigonometry focus only on criticizing Iran. And to be fair, Mehdi Hasan does not avoid that criticism because he openly acknowledges that Iran has done bad things, but at the same time he points out that Saudi Arabia has also been responsible for serious issues, something that many MAGA supporters rarely admit. And when Mehdi Hasan tried to get agreement by saying that Saudi Arabia has also done wrong, the response he got was mostly silence. Which makes it seem like the only reason for this double standard is because Saudi Arabia is an ally of the United States, even though it is still one of the more repressive regimes, and that is exactly why it stood out that Mehdi Hasan made sure to highlight Saudi Arabia during the debate.
Them away. According to US intelligence, they suspended whatever nuclear weapons research they were doing in 2003 after the fall of Saddam because they didn't want Bush to invade them. There was also a fatwa from the late Ayatollah Khamenei saying that nuclear weapons are haram, forbidden under Islamic law, which is ironic. People are now saying, I hear supporters of Khamenei saying that was a mistake. He should have actually got.
But under him,
weapons.
They did enrich more uranium.
But they didn't build weapons. Enriching uranium is their right under the NPT. Every country has the right to enrich uranium. No, not to 60%. That was a bargaining.
But they did.
That was a bargaining chip. Well, why did they enrich to 60%?
Because they're saying if you keep pushing us,
exactly.
if you keep...
Israel attacked them, so they went to 60%. They only went to... You say Iran wants to dominate. This is why it's so important for your viewers to understand the timelines here. I know in the West, we're kind of brainwashed by some of our media and politicians to believe that Iran is this Hitler country. And again...
I'm not saying that.
But I didn't say you said that. I said some in our media and politicians brainwashed over the years. Trigonometry is a great show. It hasn't been here for decades. I'm talking about the last 30, 40 years. Have been told Iran is the great, just like Iranians say the great Satan, Iran is also the great rogue state in the Middle East. Actually, when you look at it, Iran is the country that is actually now being bombed, was attacked from 1980 to 1988 by our ally Saddam Hussein, attacked with chemical weapons, lost 500,000 people, had their planes shot down by the United States of America. And then they agreed to a negotiated deal with the American government in good faith, and with the EU, by the way. The JCPOA was with the US and the EU. Iran stuck to that deal. Trump tore it up. Trump violated that deal by pulling out of it. As I said, they then began to increase enrichment only after the deal was done. So I don't accept your premise when you say, of course, they want to get nuclear weapons and enrich. No, they signed the JCPOA, which it says in the first paragraph, we will never get nuclear weapons. That's what they signed on.
But they then took that money and used it to fund their terrorist.
Okay, but now you're moving the goalposts. I just want to stick with your nuclear point. No, you made a very strong point about nuclear. They have an incentive to get nuclear weapons. I'm saying there's no evidence of that. It's the exact reverse.
Well, the incentive is clear. You're saying
now they have an incentive for sure. They just got attacked.
They always did.
Well, of course. I mean,
if you want to be
strategically, yes, there was a. But the irony is they didn't. That's the irony. If they did, they'd be fine. Ayatollah Khamenei would be alive, chilling with Kim Jong-un right now if he had got nukes like Kim Jong-un did. Let's just be very real about that. There's a reason why Pakistan and North Korea, which destabilize their region much more than some would say Iran, are fine because they have nukes.
We're in complete agreement.
But Iran didn't get nukes. This is the great irony here. They didn't get nukes. They got attacked. The leader got killed. And now I'm hearing you say it's because they wanted to get nukes. It's the exact opposite. If they had gotten nukes, they'd in a much safer place. Instead, he put out a fatwa saying no nukes. He signed up to the JCPOA, which many Iranian hardliners were against. Khamenei signed on to a deal that people in his own country said we shouldn't sign on to. They then stuck to the deal, according to the IEA. Trump then tore up the deal. They then marginally increased enrichment to 20%. They then got attacked by Israel in 2021, increased to 60%, and then last year got attacked during negotiations. And again, this year got attacked during negotiations. And one last point, the Gulf countries, it's just not true. The Omani foreign minister just wrote a piece for The Economist magazine. Oman got bombed by Iran. And even he's saying, it's very rational for Iran to do what it's doing. This is an Israeli war that America has been dragged into. America needs to be independent from Israel. The Qataris, I've spoken to very senior Qataris privately, who of course are mad that Iran are bombing their oil gas fields, but they know who they blame. They know who started the war. It was Israel and the United States, and they're reaching out to the US, telling the US, stop this. So maybe the Saudis, maybe the Emiratis wanted this war, but not all of the Gulf countries. That's just not true.
Fine.
All right, so if you want to watch the full debate, it runs for about an hour and 20 minutes and covers a wide range of topics, so you can check it out on the Trigonometry channel. But what Mehdi Hasan brings up toward the end is something that could go down as one of the most important moments in recent American history, and that is the nuclear deal that Barack Obama made with Iran to limit their nuclear program, which many people consider one of the strongest achievements of his presidency, followed by Donald Trump coming into office and pulling out of that agreement. And of course, many MAGA supporters and right-wing voices often repeat the claim that Obama sent pallets of cash to Iran, but that argument ignores the fact that the money actually belonged to Iran and was returned as part of the agreement. And when Trump decided to scrap that deal, it sent a message to the rest of the world that the United States might not stick to its commitments, and because of that, not just in relation to Iran, but also with tariffs and other international agreements, many countries have started to see the United States as less reliable and harder to trust. You know, when you have a more rational president like Barack Obama, Joe Biden, or Bill Clinton, countries are willing to make deals with the United States, but then when someone like Donald Trump comes in and tears those agreements apart, it creates a situation where other countries start losing trust and become hesitant to enter into future deals, and we are already seeing this play out as some of the United States allies are choosing not to get involved in certain conflicts, while some MAGA supporters complain that those allies are not standing by the United States. But from another perspective, when a country takes aggressive action against another nation that did not directly attack them and has its own historical grievances, including past interference like the overthrow of its government in the 1950s, it is not surprising that allies would step back and refuse to support what they see as an unnecessary conflict. And that is a point Mehdi Hasan highlights effectively in this discussion. And like I said earlier, this could be one of those moments that people look back on decades from now, whether it is 20, 50, or even 100 years, and see it as a turning point that reshaped global politics, where a stable agreement made under a leader like Barack Obama was later dismantled by a more unpredictable figure, potentially disrupting international relationships and even the global economy. But I want to know what you think about all of this. Are you on Mehdi Hasan's side and agree with his arguments about Iran and the United States, or do you find yourself agreeing more with the right-wing hosts on Trigonometry? Share your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.